वेरी गुड आफ्टरनून. कैसे हैं आप सब लोग? सब बढ़िया? अच्छा. I guess in the last class, in the last session, we were discussing some of the topic regarding, if I'm talking about several of the topic, if I'm talking about in this entire league of making several of the videos regarding I am saying क्या sociology के concepts है ना, several of the topics we have discussed. If I'm talking about one of the concept was basically क्या sociology and common sense. ठीक. Then I basically talked about several of the things that if I'm talking about that sociology with other social sciences है ना, so these kind of concepts I have done. ठीक. So if I'm talking about it, there have been several of the attempts that have been made by the Yojna is if I'm talking about regarding the paper 1 के topics at if I'm talking about है ना in certain amount of in certain number we have discussed regarding that thing. ठीक. So while deciding the today's session, I was in a dilemma that whether I should be taking the paper 1 का topic or I should be taking regarding the paper 2 का topics. ठीक. So I thought that probably we have been done with several of the paper 1 का topic. So it would be good that if we are क्या switching to paper 2 कि कुछ important topics so that you will be able to get a entire gist of what is happening in the sociology का मेरा entire discipline. ठीक. तो चलो यार, today that is why one of the most important topic in the sociology का discipline is Sanskritization, and that too of paper 2. ठीक. So in today's lecture, or I would be calling that as an interaction, in this class we will be discussing regarding something about the Sanskritization, that what is happening in Sanskritization and what is the concept, what are the implication, what is basically if I'm talking about the real time application, what is successful Sanskritization, what is unsuccessful Sanskritization. ठीक. So that we are going to discuss today. ठीक है, चलो let us start यार, है ना, because there have been a considerable, if I'm talking about, काफी टाइम हो गया है आप लोगों से बात किए हुए, तो अच्छा लगता है बीच में आप लोग आते रहते हैं. चलो let us start यार. ठीक. So the topic of the discussion regarding today is basically the concept of Sanskritization. ठीक. तो देखते हैं यार. ठीक. Obviously it is done by me, that is Samarth Sir. अब तो आपको मैं अच्छे से पहचान गया हूँ, आप मुझे अच्छे से पहचान गए, तो देखिएगा. ठीक. If I'm talking about this concept of Sanskritization, that is obviously I had told you is a very important concept of paper 2. Take paper 2. Take. And if I'm talking about the philosopher who is responsible, or the thinker or the sociologist who is basically responsible for reading and highlighting about this concept is one of the very famous Indologists, that is M.N. Srinivasan. Okay. If I'm talking about the M.N. Srinivasan, he was basically, if I'm talking about, he was basically the Indologist. He was the Indologist. Who are Indologists? Indologists are basically the people who are studying India. Take, who are studying India. See. So he was basically the Indologist who carried out the study of Sanskritization, to be more exact. Take. So let us see here. Take. इंडोलॉजिस्ट की यार मैं बात करता हूँ. ठीक. इंडोलॉजिस्ट की यार मैं बात करता हूँ, तो देखिएगा. ठीक. इंडोलॉजिस्ट में वन ऑफ द प्रोमिनेंट इंडोलॉजिस्ट इज ऑब्वियसली एम.एन. श्रीनिवासन, और इन्होंने दिया था मेरे कंसेप्ट ऑफ सैंस्क्रिटाइजेशन. तो देखिएगा, आई वुड बी डिस्कसिंग फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल दैट व्हाट इज बेसिकली द मीनिंग ऑफ सैंस्क्रिटाइजेशन. देखिएगा, फर्स्टली आई विल बी टेलिंग यू इन द लेमन लैंग्वेज, देन आई वुड बी क्या स्विचिंग टू द मोर एग्जैक्ट डेफिनेशन. ठीक. देखिएगा, firstly the layman term and then the exact definition, that what was basically exactly told by M.N. Srinivasan. ठीक. So please see here that here I am considering the 4 varna system. 4 varna system यार मैंने consider किया. ठीक. That is on the top there are the Brahmins. ठीक. ठीक. Then came Kshatriyas. ठीक. Then came Vaishyas and then came Shudras. So that is क्या 4 वर्ण आश्रम, if I'm talking about on which the entire हिंदू का structure that is based. ठीक. So यार अगर हम देखें, ठीक, earlier what used to happen that these varna system were not based on were basically क्या driven by exact motive of division of labor. ठीक. But over the period of time, if I'm talking about, थोड़ा सा इसको history से link करते हैं, that is in the post Gupta phase, in the post Gupta and the Gupta phase, I would be क्या rather calling the Gupta age. ठीक. In the Gupta age, I am saying that this varna system became more rigid. Take. So if anyone basically want, for example, I'm taking about the Shudra. ठीक है, Shudra क्या were at the rock bottom. ठीक. Shudras were at the rock bottom. ठीक. So if these people really wanted to have a certain kind of social mobility in the society, ठीक, so they always thought that this caste system is really very rigid, है ना, this caste system is really very rigid, and it is not providing us the scope of social mobility. That is, scope of social mobility was not there. Scope of social mobility, that is, what is social mobility? That is movement along the social structure, movement along the social structure, ठीक, कि मैं social, अगर if I am talking about in a layman term, what is social mobility? For example, मेरा promotion हो गया, so that would be considered as क्या? Social mobility. मेरा demotion हो गया, so that would be considered as downward social mobility, है ना? So movement along the social structure I would be क्या rather calling as क्या? Social mobility, ठीक? So I am saying that in the caste system, if I am talking about, this was very rigid, very rigid. So the scope of the social mobility was not there. Scope of the social mobility was not there, was absent or negligible, ठीक. So if I am talking about the scope of the social mobility, ठीक, so if I am talking about this concept of Sanskritization, so Sanskritization basically emerged as, Sanskritization as a concept basically emerged as an alternative for ensuring social mobility in this rigid caste structure, ठीक. It emerged as an alternative that how people can basically क्या, or it would, I would be calling it that people basically क्या tried to elevate their status in this rigid caste structure, and that is how the concept of the social mobility came क्या, the concept of the Sanskritization basically क्या take place, ठीक. अब देखिएगा what I am trying to say, देखिए. For example, I am saying that Shudras are there. For example, they wanted to appraise their status in the social hierarchy, take. So what they would be doing, they would be considering the people to whom they wanted to look like, to whom they wanted to look like, take. So they would be rather thinking about the Vaishyas or Kshatriyas or Shudras or the Brahmins, take. They also had a certain kind of aspiration that I should also be respected, take. So what they would be doing, they would be changing their thinking, their ideology, their way of acting, their culture in such a manner that they would start resembling like the people of the hierarchy that are क्या, above to them, ठीक, of the hierarchy that are above to them, ठीक. So probably there would be a case that Shudras क्या basically starts to behave like they would adopt certain kind of practices that is done by the Kshatriyas, take, that is done by the Kshatriyas. For example, in today's time, if I am talking about, there is one very prominent example that you can see is of घुड़चढ़ी. घुड़चढ़ी के ऊपर यार आजकल if I am talking about ना, lot of caste based rights are basically taking place. If I am talking about the culture of the घुड़चढ़ी, what is happening that during the marriage, the Kshatriyas used to be early the warriors, so they used to think that I am coming for my princess in order to take her home, take, by riding a horse. So that has always been considered as the prerogative of if I am talking about the Kshatriyas, take. So but if I am talking about in recent times, ठीक, though if I am talking about in tier 1 cities, that distinction has totally gone, take. But sometimes the Dalit section is also adopting this practice. Yes, they should be doing that. They also have that aspiration, take. So they are also adopting this practice of घुड़चढ़ी during their marriage, and that is why in several of the cases you have seen that there have been caste based violence on the basis of this social practice, that Kshatriyas are considering that this is our only prerogative, and the Shudras are considering that it should be given to us also. Then there comes caste conflict, take. So similarly, that was just an example that people today that is the lower caste are having a certain kind of aspiration to rise in the caste structure by adopting several of the practices that are done by the upper caste, so that as the upper caste are also respected, I would also be respected after a certain period of time. Just like if A is eating apple and he is respected in the society, I will also eat apple and I will be also respected in the society. So that is kind of comparison which I wanted to draw, that the people who are in the lower structure, lower hierarchy in the caste structure, when they are they are adopting certain kind of practices, certain kind of way of thinking in order to raise their status in in the caste hierarchy, so that just if the Brahmin is doing something, if the Brahmin is adopting the Upanayana ceremony, I will also be adopting the Upanayana ceremony. If the Brahmin is not eating beef, I will also not be eating beef. Okay, so these kind of practices, if the Brahmin is doing, I will also be doing. So if he is respected, I will also be respected in the society. So that is basically the kind of a I would say the chronology that I wanted to draw. Take when I'm basically discussing about the concept of the Sanskritization. Take, so that was a kind of layman explanation which I have told you. Take, now coming to the more exact definition that was exactly given by M.N. Srinivasan. Take, so M.N. Srinivasan basically said, that Sanskritization is a process. Sanskritization is a process. Sanskritization is a process. Is a process by which low caste Hindus, tribals, or individuals are changing their way of thinking, practices in the direction of Dvij-born, ठीक, that people that if I'm talking about the Dvij-born, that is the people who are considered to be of relatively upper in that are considered to be relative upper in the caste hierarchy, है ना. So that is the concept which I really wanted to draw in that case. ठीक, so Sanskritization according to M.N. Srinivasan basically said that in this process low caste Hindu tribals or any of the individual take are changing their way of thinking, practices, ideologies in a certain way that is being done by the Dvij-born. So I would be also adopting this practice. ठीक है, in order to gain a certain kind of social pride in the practice which they are doing. ठीक है, so in order to elevate their status, in order to achieve social mobility in the rigid caste structure, that is basically the concept of the Sanskritization, what it is saying. ठीक, so that is basically I have explained you what is Sanskritization. ठीक, but not only M.N. Srinivasan, there have been other of the philosophers who have basically dealt about this topic. ठीक, they have basically, if I'm talking about, they have searched for several of the examples in several of the places of the country that where this Sanskritization practices has been undertaken. So let us take a view of several other of the thinkers if I am talking about. ठीक, so I would be now be discussing regarding the examples. Examples की यार बात करते हैं थोड़ा सा. Examples of Sanskritization that is basically being given by several of the sociologists. ठीक है, several of the sociologists. देखिएगा, number first I would be discussing regarding F.G. Bailey. ठीक है, ठीक, F.G. Bailey के बारे में थोड़ा सा बात करते हैं. If I'm talking about the F.G. Bailey, to be more exact, F.G. Bailey studied the status of the untouchables of Orissa. ठीक, he basically said that the untouchables of Orissa, ठीक, untouchables of Orissa are also adopting certain of the practices, ठीक है, in order to elevate their status that they are basically adopting the Sanskritization practices in order to elevate their status in the caste structure. Number first example that was given by F.G. Bailey based on his study in Orissa. He said that there are several of the untouchable community which are present over there, okay, and they are adopting the Sanskritization practices in order to elevate their status in the caste structure. Number first point. Okay. Number second, I am saying regarding Cohen's study of the Nonias community. Cohen's study of Nonias community. If I'm talking about the Cohen, he basically said that there is one of the community, if I'm talking about, that is called Nonias. So if I'm talking about the Cohen, he mentions that there has been several of the attempts of the Sanskritization that is basically done by the Nonia community in order to elevate their status in the caste structure, that is they wanted to Sanskritize, they wanted to adopt certain kind of practices through which they would be also be respected in the society. So first I have told you about the FG Baylis, the second I have told you regarding the Cohen, ठीक है. The third I am basically going to say regarding क्या Berryman, ठीक. If I'm talking about Berryman basically studied the Sanskritization practices of certain of the tribes in the Himalayan valley में यार काफी सारी tribes थी, ठीक है. So they were also क्या adopting certain kind of practices if I'm talking about, ठीक है, if I'm talking about regarding the Sanskritization, ठीक है. तो Sanskritization में यार उन्होंने काफी कुछ किया काम, ठीक. So the three example which I have already told you, that is क्या number first, that it was not only studied by the M.N. Srinivasan, उनका ये parent concept था, ठीक. Then I am telling you that क्या certain of the examples that certain of the other sociologists also studied this pattern, ठीक, and simultaneously co-calling it with the M.N. Srinivasan का Sanskritization वाला concept, ठीक. तो किस ने पढ़ा मेरा, ठीक. If I am talking about number first, I have told you regarding the FG Bailey के बारे में मैंने बात की, ठीक. तो FG Bailey basically said that I had studied certain kind of Sanskritization practices among the untouchables of Odisha, number first point, ठीक. Then I basically told you regarding the Cohen ने क्या, he adopted the Nonias community का यार उन्होंने study किया, ठीक. In the Nonias community he found that there have been certain kind of Sanskritization tendencies that have been observed in the Nonia community. Then I told you about Berryman basically observed certain kind of Sanskritization practices that was done by several of the tribes that are present in the Himalayan valleys, ठीक है. So FG Bailey, Berryman and Cohen का यार मैंने आपसे बात किया, ठीक. So that was क्या, I had done with the definition, I had done with the layman explanation, I had done with the examples, ठीक. Now in Sanskritization I would be discussing that when your Sanskritization would be called as successful Sanskritization and when your क्या Sanskritization would be called as unsuccessful Sanskritization, ठीक. तो थोड़ा सा ध्यान देने की कोशिश कीजिएगा. देखिए, if I'm talking about the Sanskritization, that you had adopted certain kind of practices in order to elevate your status in the caste hierarchy. So now Sanskritization on that basis, that whether your claim to be belonging to that of the upper caste is क्या considered or not, ठीक. So in that case I would be discussing regarding two cases of that, ठीक है. क्या है दो cases, थोड़ा सा देखिएगा यार. देखिए, I am saying that you have adopted the practices, that is okay. Now the cases could be of successful Sanskritization and unsuccessful Sanskritization, ठीक. थोड़ा सा ध्यान दीजिए. If I'm talking about the cases of the successful Sanskritization, तो थोड़ा सा ध्यान दीजिए that whatever the claim you are making, if that is accepted by the people, that the reference group which you are eyeing, ठीक है. For example, the Vaishyas are adopting certain kind of practices, that is क्या that I would be calling by keeping the reference group, that is Brahmin in picture, ठीक. So if they have adopted certain kind of practices, by keeping the Brahmins by taking Brahmins as their I would be saying reference group, take. So I would be saying that if the claim to the level, if the claim by the people at the level you want to Sanskritize, if your claim is accepted by that community to which level you wanted to Sanskritize, if your claim is accepted, then that would be called as the successful Sanskritization. For example, I am saying, यहाँ पे देखना, अगेन 4 वर्णा सिस्टम, ठीक. 4 वर्णा सिस्टम में मैंने क्या बोला, क्या ब्राह्मण, क्षत्रियास, वैश्यास एंड शूद्रास, ठीक. फॉर एग्जांपल शूद्रास वांटेड टू संस्कृताइज टू क्षत्रिया, ठीक, wanted to Sanskrit to the level of the Kshatriyas, take. If their claim is accepted, if the claim is accepted by the Kshatriyas, take, so that would be called as a successful Sanskritization, take. But I am saying if the claim is not accepted by the community, to the level to which you wanted to Sanskritize. See, if the claim is not accepted, then that would be called as unsuccessful Sanskritization. That is, Shudras wanted to Sanskritize to the level of the Kshatriyas, but that claim is not accepted by the Kshatriyas, that even if you are adopting our practice, you will not be considered as a Kshatriya. Okay? So your claim is not accepted, so your attempt for Sanskritization has failed, and that will be considered as an unsuccessful Sanskritization. Okay? So that is basically the two cases if I am talking about, that whether your Sanskritization would be successful or your Sanskritization would be unsuccessful. Okay? So thoda sa dekhiye that since I am saying that Sanskritization could be both successful as well as unsuccessful. Okay? So probably I would be saying that in one case you are saying that your Sanskritization is successful. Okay? And in one case your Sanskritization is unsuccessful. Okay? Your Sanskritization is unsuccessful. So at one place you are saying कि यार success हो भी सकता है, at one place you are saying कि यार success नहीं भी हो सकता है. Okay? So in that case it is very feasible for me to draw that there could be a kind of difficulty level. If I am talking about है ना, there could be a kind of difficulty level. Difficulty level यार एक हो सकता है. Okay? That is, I am saying in this case, in this case I would be saying that there could be certain of the attempts that would be considered as easy, that it was easy to Sanskritize, as well as there would be several of the instances when your Sanskritization attempts would be considered as difficult. Okay? So when your Sanskritization becomes difficult and when your Sanskritization becomes easy, that we will be discussing. देखिए, again in this case, kindly consider, फिर से एक बार देखिएगा 4 वर्ना system. ठीक, 4 वर्ना system आपने लिया. ठीक, in this 4 वर्ना system, I am saying then again आप क्या करेंगे? 4 वर्ना system में क्या? Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. ठीक, I am saying your difficulty level is proportionate to the distance which you have to travel in this mobility. Okay? For example, I am saying that if the Shudra wanted to Sanskritize to the level of the Vaishya, then that would be relatively easy. Okay? But if I am saying that if the same Shudra, if the same community of the Shudra wanted to Sanskritize to the level of the Brahmin, then that would be considered as difficult. Take. So I am saying the more you wanted to raise your prestige, the more is the difference between the reference group, that is the level to which you wanted to Sanskritize, the reference group, and the community that is committing, and the community which is making Sanskritization attempt. ठीक, जितना ज्यादा ये डिफरेंस रहेगा, more difficult will be the Sanskritization. ठीक है, just like I told you that for Shudra to Sanskritize to the level of the Vaishya, that would be easy, and if the Shudra wanted to Sanskritize to the level of the Brahmin, that would be relatively tough. ठीक, so that is how I am evaluating that more the difference between the two of the levels, that is the reference group and the community which is attempting for the Sanskritization. The more will be the difference, the harder is going to be the process of the Sanskritization, and similarly comes the chronology of what could be the successful Sanskritization and what could be the unsuccessful Sanskritization. ठीक, तो यार देखिएगा, अच्छा देखिए, I have told you regarding that Sanskritization could be tough or easy. ठीक, tough or easy. ठीक, इसी chronology में if I am drawing, that I am considering again 4 varna system. ठीक, now I am saying if the Sanskritization becomes difficult, if the difference is way too much, that your Sanskritization becomes difficult, or there could be a case, okay, when first case I am saying when Sanskritization Sanskritization is difficult. And number second case, when there is no scope of Sanskritization, no scope of Sanskritization. When there is no scope of Sanskritization. ठीक? So I am saying that there would be no scope of Sanskritization in case, for example, I am saying, देखिए, Brahmins, to which of the level they will Sanskritize, because there is a no community that is क्या upper to Brahmins in the four Varna system. ठीक? So for Brahmins there is no scope of Sanskritization because there is no caste that is क्या above to Brahmins. Second, I am saying that there could be difficult Sanskritization. For example, क्या Shudras wanted to क्या Sanskritize to the level of the Brahmins. That is extremely very difficult, very difficult. ठीक है? So in the cases when the Sanskritization is very difficult or there is no scope of Sanskritization, then people are majorly adopting to the practice of Westernization. Westernization. ठीक? क्या करेंगे भैया? कल्चर से हटकर, कल्चर मतलब क्या इन कास्ट हायरार्की से हटकर they would be adopting another alternative to raise their mobility in this society. Rather they would be adopting the Westernization as a scope of mobility when the Sanskritization is not possible, for example Brahmins, and when the Sanskritization is very much difficult, for example Shudras to Brahmins. ठीक? So here comes the concept of Westernization, that when you will be adopting the Westernization, usually it is क्या adopted, ठीक है? जब हमारा Sanskritization, आज तो यार आजकल if I'm talking about in the today's time, yes, the Westernization का concept has become very much common, but at that time थोड़ा अगर मैं पीछे चला जाऊँ, that is 40 to 50 years back, ठीक? At that time, ठीक, this was basically happening in the society, ठीक है? So Westernization that Brahmins started, Brahmins also wanted to raise their prestige, ठीक है? Everybody is having his own aspirations, so they will start wearing coats, they will start wearing कोट पैंट पहनना शुरू कर देंगे, इंग्लिश बोलना शुरू कर देंगे. So that is all क्या Westernization. They will start eating the English food in order to have a certain kind of aspiration, have कि यार मैं तुमसे ऊपर उठ गया, है ना? So here comes the concept of Westernization if I'm talking about it. So if not Sanskritization, and Sanskritization was very difficult, so people also adopted the case of क्या मेरा Westernization. अब देखिएगा यार मैं क्या बोल रहा हूँ, देखिए, ठीक? अब देखिए, I have discussed regarding what is the meaning of Sanskritization, what is the definition of Sanskritization, what are the examples of Sanskritization, when the Sanskritization is easy, when the Sanskritization is difficult, what could be the alternative to the Sanskritization, ठीक है? So these major aspects I have basically dealt with. Only one thing is left, that is criticism. Because if I'm talking about the sociology का paper, you will always be having to, there is always a need that you have to write the criticism, है ना? Criticism यार बहुत important होता है किसी भी चीज का, because there are always two of the phases. देखिएगा, number first if I'm talking about, yes, there have been concept of the Sanskritization if I'm talking about, but D.N. Mazumdar ने कहा कि यार आजकल क्या हो रहा है, there had been no such tendencies of the Sanskritization, rather there have been tendencies of desanskritization. When I am saying desanskritization, that could be easily be connected with the fact that nowadays lot of communities are basically wanting the scheduled caste status, scheduled tribe status, OBC का status, है ना? So now क्यों reservation के लिए. So everybody wanted to have a certain kind of lower mobility in the society in order to ensure a kind of reservation for them in the public domain, ठीक है? So that could be highlighted as a tendency of the desanskritization. That was exactly being highlighted by one of the thinker, that is D.N. Mazumdar. क्या? D.N. Mazumdar. ठीक? अगला देखना, अगला यार अगर मैं बात करता हूं, that is Harold Gold. ठीक, यही है ना? हाँ, Harold Gold. ठीक, If I'm talking about the Herald Board ने बोला that you are basically equating the Sanskritization with a kind of culture का camouflage है ना, that culture के terms में you are equating Sanskritization, but there has never been the tendency regarding the culture. There has always been a tendency to raise their economic status. So keeping culture as the basis of the Sanskritization is not going to suffice. Rather, you basically have to consider the economic aspect regarding the concept of Sanskritization. That he highlighted that there had been economic deprivations. That is basically I'm saying is changing the entire the social mobility का scenario. ठीक. Culture has never been the basis of the Sanskritization. Rather, there has been always the economic tendencies that has guided the aspect of the Sanskritization in our society. ठीक. If I'm talking about the third of the critic, that is of Yogendra Singh. ठीक. Yogendra Singh ने यार कहा that you people are focusing too much on the Sanskritic practices, but you are ignoring the non-Sanskritic tradition. That concept of the Sanskritization neglects the non-Sanskritic traditions. Non-Sanskritic traditions को आप क्या कर रहे हैं? Ignore कर रहे हैं. So that is not going to suffice your case. ठीक. So I had discussed regarding क्या Harold Gold का criticism. ठीक. Then there was a criticism of क्या Yogendra Singh. I have discussed regarding the D.N. Mazumdar का concept of desanskritization. So if you are writing a 3 or 4 critique है ना, that is very much sufficient. That is very much sufficient in the examination. ठीक है. So that is all यार. I think I have been able to make justice for 40 minutes which you people have given me, around 35 to 40 minutes. ठीक है. You people have given me. ठीक है. So that is very satisfactory to me, and I hope you people also like the work which I have done or the way in which I had tried to represent it. ठीक है. So that is all यार. That is all. ठीक. हाँ. ठीक. तो आज के लिए यार इतना ही. We will be meeting with another topic next time, probably next week. ठीक है. I will be coming and meet you people again. ठीक है. तो यार अब क्या क्लास एंड करने का टाइम हो गया. This is my तकिया कलाम. No one should be giving it. क्या हंसते रहिए, एक मिनट हंसते रहिए, मुस्कुराते रहिए, मेरी क्लास देखते रहिए, because UPSC is not a game of IQ, it is a game of EQ. चलो बाय बाय बच्चा.